Be funny, Ben. We need you.
Hello and welcome to the Quackcast. This is Quackcast number 605. This is the Freedom Cast with Ozone Ocean and Tanserine.
Hello.
Hi. Pitt
I
and
hope you're
Baines.
free.
What's that?
I hope you are free
Oh, I'm
today.
only just free. I'm off the incredible sacrifice of Pitface and Baines, who are
Yeah.
stuck in bondage somewhere. Or Pitface literally. And Bane figuratively.
How do you know, though?
Oh, God. Let's not speculate.
Okay.
So yeah, Freedom Cast. So we're talking about the idea of the whole myth of freedom, the way that it's been taken in modern pop cultures. In everyone's fighting for freedom, and that's the ultimate goal that everyone wishes to attain, or at least that's the catch cry of every oppressed group. And that's all they really want is freedom, and that will make everything right and everything better once they get this unattainable jewel of goodness. Everything will be right. But it's in all these Hollywood films and fantastical historical epics. It's always freedom is the thing that people are talking about. So we're going to talk about that and how that's a bit of a myth and how it's just a bit silly. And often these in the real world, these people who are meant to have fought for freedom were actually fighting for the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So,
Or for something completely different. There is also that.
yeah, something completely different. And now for something completely different, it's me talking about the featured comic for the week, which was Creep Hunter. So I'm going to talk about that now. Well, hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Bobby Carter, Creep Hunter. Bobby Carter, retired police officer and one of the few genuine monster hunters. He's the guy you call in when the ghosties and ghoulies start bothering everyone and causing a ruckus in the neighborhood. He'll clean it up and sort them out, whatever it takes. This is all black and white art. Nicely stylized, well practiced, good looking work. The story is funny and engaging. It's an action comedy. Quite enjoyable, episodic in style, so very pro-comic like in the way it's done. It's quite enjoyable. There aren't too many pages, so it's very easy to get into at the moment, but the story is fairly densely packed and it goes along at a very quick pace, so this is quite a compressed story. It's quite appropriate to the whole October Halloween theme as well. So it's the perfect time to get into Bobby Carter, Creep Hunter. Start reading this and get along with it. It's by Finn Magic, who is this fantastic creator who's been with Duck for years and years and years. So he's a good person, and he does other great comics as well that you might want to check out when you look at his profile. So have a look at Bobby Carter, Creep Hunter, and his other works. So this Bobby Carter, Creep Hunter is rated E for everyone. Read it. And that was the featured comic, which was Creep Hunter. Okay, so next up we have the featured music. Gunwallace has given us a theme to a little comic called Forest Reckoning. Creepy atmospheric sounds fading in and out of the grey mist surrounding you. Are they the ghosts of lost children, or are they the calls of tiny, playful forest spirits as they dodge and tease and attempt to lure you deeper into the mysterious depths of the dark, shadowy woods? Take it away, Gumwallace, with the theme to Forest Reckoning. that was the featured music. The theme to Forest Reckoning by DPAT57, and it's rated T for teen. Okay, now back to the Quackcast. Okay, so we're talking about freedom and the myth of freedom, and how these so many historical fiction things, movies and stuff like that, comics, whatever, always have this idea of some oppressed people fighting back and having freedom as their catch cry, but in reality that pretty much never happens, or never happened.
Well, let's not say that it never happens. It's that, and why are we starting on the whole freedom thing? Because we are thinking not of a fantasy people being oppressed by this fantasy oppressor and they want their freedom, whatever that is. We're talking about representations of historical peoples that fought against other peoples, and how they tend to be presented as fighting for freedom when that was not necessarily the case, or it could have been partly the case but not the whole story, and so on and so forth. So yeah, a misrepresentation of historical fact about certain points in history that have cool elements, but some other elements are not so cool, so we kick them to the curb and replace with freedom. So that's the thing. And we were thinking about that because the latest offender in that sort of thing is the woman king. And we are not the ones saying that. People that know better than us are saying that. So we're talking about people that are very versed in African history, and especially African people that have grown with this culture and the historical background of what is being explored in The Woman King. And they were very, at least let's say they were very irritated, if not angry, downright angry, that they took a unit, like a, they took a tribe that happened to have an all-woman fighting unit, sort of like African Amazons they are being presented. At least that's how they came across to me. Um, they ran with that as them being these defenders of freedom for African people or their tribe, at least against the white oppression. And that couldn't have been further from the truth, historically speaking.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole Wikipedia article about the film, and this isn't a film I haven't seen. I don't know anything about. This is the first time I've known anything just reading this Wikipedia article now, and it comes down to, it says role in slavery, and it says, yeah, basically these people, this kingdom of people, made their money on slavery, and they always had, like slaving within Africa and then trading to foreign countries, and that was what they had always done. And after slavery was stopped, the transatlantic slave trade, they still continued slavery within the country, so they had always done it. So it's a bit of a weird thing to have them being against it. So, but
Yeah,
I haven't seen the film. I don't know.
yeah, I haven't seen it either. I have only seen the reviews, so that's why we're only talking about this particular criticism and element, in that they present these people as being super anti-slavery in all shapes and sizes, which of course teaches people that have no idea about this particular kingdom in this part of African history, teaches them something completely wrong. So if you don't go to double check, and why would you? I mean, do you always go to research the historical movie that you just saw, or do you just take it into account as being roughly true? I mean, okay, so we all consider that some license, like creative license, will have been taken with every film, but we also assume that in main in the main themes they will have been faithful to history, right? So people would trust this film to have represented the gist of who these people were correctly, which of course it doesn't do. It presents something completely different.
Yeah. So they're showing like a something that appeals to modern prejudices or modern tastes, which is the idea of like an underdog people against baddies, and they're supporting freedom, which is, you know, the ultimate goal that everyone seems to love in American films. So they just pick these people seemingly at random, it seems. They're the wrong people to represent it, and it's
I
that's
think
a bit
it's
of an issue.
like I'm not even sure at this point if it is just lack of research. I mean, how much does it take to go to Wikipedia with this? But I think it was the element of having the all woman unit.
Oh, right, I see. So it's not a random thing.
Yeah.
So it's built on the idea of, okay, they're all women, so this is pretty cool. This will sell the idea. This is unique. This will appeal to people in at the moment. So let's do this. Ah, but there are slavers. Oh we'll just change that. No one will care.
Yeah. Who wants to hear about that? And yeah. So two things. One, the go-to freedom pattern, which is super appealing, and don't let me tell you it's not appealing. I love it. It's one of my favorite tropes, and um, I don't know anyone that wouldn't like it. But what I don't like about it is when it is used willy nilly, like a skeleton key for plot, when it shouldn't be there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, okay, well, let's talk about some other things where freedom pops up and it's rather noxious because it wasn't obviously the thing that group was about. So the most famous one is Braveheart, because they say, they won't take our freedom. So everyone who knows anything about history knows that Braveheart was all like a fantasy in every single aspect. But except for the fact that there was a William Wallace, he did exist. He just didn't do anything that was in the film. So his idea of, like, you know, calling for freedom against the English is a bit silly because, you know, he was an aristocrat just like they were, and he was oppressing his particular group. But that has, the way it's represented in that particular film is a barbaric kind of more nature-loving, more original kind of essential kind of a people against this hoity-toity upper class Englishy kind of people.
Yeah.
And it's like English versus Scottish, which is again false because they were Normans. So these are sort of more Frenchified people against basically British, you know, Scottish. You know, they're more, you know, just British people. Anyway, William
Actually,
Wallace.
I think Braveheart is really Captain Scotland. That's all it is.
Captain Scotland, yeah.
It's very Americanized. At least, like, this idea is like if it was a pattern, it's completely repeated in the Patriot, which is
Oh, another Mel Gibson film.
there, and it is American revolutionaries versus the English again, and you have the English represented like they are Nazis. They burned down a church, I think, or something like that in the movie. I don't remember. I remember like the atrocities being ascribed to them that didn't happen. Well, that's not saying that they were kind people. Okay. What I'm saying is that they were not Nazis in that they didn't engage in Nazi practices as we
Yeah,
categorize them. Um,
but
not like that, at least.
I was just interested in where this freedom idea came from, and I think that's a modern American idea because you see that in
Yeah.
the idea of like the mythology of America freeing Europe from the Nazi occupation in the Second World War, and they helping them have their freedom, which is again like there's a grain of truth there, but it's been sort of
Mhm.
magnified massively into this.
Yeah. I mean, it always feels like there was only Germany, uh, the USA, Russia, and a little bit of Britain
Yeah,
in World
there's only
War
three
II.
countries, and that's all. But
Yeah.
okay, no, it doesn't come from there though. So that is just
Mm.
like an echo. That's like another kind of like amplification. So it comes from American independence. That's where it comes from originally.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
obviously, there's the French, Revolution and all that kind of thing that gave birth to
So
the
the French
American Revolution.
Revolution, though, wasn't about freedom
Oh no, I'm
in that.
saying that's where the idea of revolution came from.
Ah,
But
okay. Hmm.
this that's where the idea of the American Revolution came from. But
Yeah.
that idea of freedom is very much rooted in the American Revolution. So they're like thinking, oh, we're free now from our masters over there to have our own self determination, to have our country the way we wanted to have it. And they base all that mythology really comes from that kind of root, I think. And that's how it gets into
Um,
this modern pop
yeah.
culture.
Well, right now, and for easily the two-thirds of the 20th century, if not the entire 20th century, American culture basically became the global culture.
Yeah, de facto.
Yeah, especially post World War II. But even before that, there were Americanizations of various flavors. Um, so, because the American War of Independence is justifiably so very important, the pattern of we are throwing off the masters and gaining our freedom and blah blah is again a dominant pattern in common culture. Now, that is not the only thing though, because depending on where you come from, you also have matching patterns of freedom. Like, for example, our War of Independence, the Greek War of Independence, was the third in the domino of revolutions. Like, we had the French, the Americans, and then it was us. It was our turn. Um, and we were directly inspired from the Americans in this. Not in that we didn't want freedom. We had, I think, seven or eight failed revolution attempts in the past, in since the um, 17th century. So we did want our freedom before the American Revolution. It's just that it felt that it was an even better time to go for it at the time. So we also have the idea of throwing off the oppressor and gaining self-determination and freedom through that. So I think countries that have independence wars also have this pattern, which is why it takes so well cross-culturally.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is, I mean, okay, so the American Revolution happened in 1775, something like that.
1776, right?
Oh, okay.
I'll Google
Close.
it.
The Greek Revolution was the successful one's late 19th century, and that kind of
1821 was the Greek one.
early 19th century. Okay,
Yeah.
but it was continuing for a long time into the 20th century.
Technically, it finished 1830.
Mm.
But we had the freedom struggles within because we had the king to throw off after that.
And you didn't get places
so we also
like
had that.
some places in the north, I think, didn't come until quite late. But so this isn't something that's like in the distant past. This is relatively recent.
Mm-hmm.
All these kind of freedom struggles. And I mean, today we look at these countries as being, okay, Greece, America, other places like France, Italy, places like that. But historically, that's not what they were.
Poland is another one.
Yeah, Poland. That's a really dodgy one. But historically, these places weren't like huge kind of countries. They were small kingdoms and principalities, kind of loosely affiliated and joined together. So they couldn't really, call for freedom. Like in the United States is called the United States because it wasn't a country. It was just there's a little state here, little state there, little state there. It wasn't this big place. So the way we look at it today is a very different thing to what these places were actually in the past. They were little tiny conglomerations of like federations, like I don't know, loose kind of joinings of these countries together. Like Italy wasn't a country until the 19th century.
Depends on how you define it. But definitely post-Napoleon and like after the Austro-Hungarians were done occupying it was a country.
Garibaldi was the one who kind of united this whole place together. But there was Germany.
We're guessing though. We are going to lose whoever is listening.
I'm just going to say, like, okay, so Germany wasn't a whole country either, and there were like certain areas of that were taken over by Napoleon. Prussia was taken over by Napoleon, and they fought for their freedom against Napoleon. So
yeah, I don't think it was defined as fighting for freedom, and that's the thing, is that they were kingdoms fighting against an empire that was expanding at the time, which was the French Empire.
Sorry, what did you say about they weren't fighting for freedom?
Well, the call to arms wasn't let's fight for freedom in the sense that we understand it now, at least.
That's my overall point. That's what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. So, that's sort of what I'm trying to say. So I was like, so various like areas within Germany, well, what we know today as Germany, they were like, okay, Germany didn't exist. They were like a bunch of different like affiliated, the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, so they got invaded, and they fought for their freedom, their individual freedom, to be, not being invaded, to be, have their own self-determination. But the way it's portrayed now in movies, these kind of things would be like, oh, we're fighting for our nation, for all of Germany to be free. Whereas, that's very much an incorrect kind of view, because none of these places were big nation states fighting against, other big nation states. And that's where a lot of this, this overall kind of, one small group against a big group, and they're fighting to have their own identity against this big group, and that really never, like, I can't say never happened, because there's always the exceptions, but it
you know what, the
just
thing
wasn't
is
something.
that we tend to forget that serfdom and having this system of how do we call the system where we have the serfs? I don't know. My brain is not working.
Feudalism.
Thank you. Feudalism. So feudalism isn't that far away. Okay. So during the time of feudalism, you didn't really have ethnostates or states per se like we have them now. What you had was your various lords with the serfs that went with the territory, and they fought for their territories. And it was not an issue of freedom for the people. It was an issue of who gets to have what territory. Basically, like, I don't know, like wolf packs fighting each other. And that's that for territory. So the serfs, the life of the serfs wouldn't really change, quote unquote. Okay, depending, like if you had a better master, I guess you had a better life, but you would still be a serf. Your life wouldn't be different.
Yeah, okay. On that subject, I was reading this biography a long time ago about this guy. It's called The Hussar. It's a great little biography about this fellow. What's his name? Norbert Landsknecht. It's got a weird name. So what happened to him? He was in somewhere in Germany, I think. I can't remember. Like, it was the Low Countries, lower areas. I can't remember. But what was happening was his mother was really worried that the French were going to invade and take over their area. So she sent him to live with his uncle. So he was living with his uncle for a very short time, and one day his uncle came home dressed up, in a stylish hussar uniform. And this guy was like, dumbfounded. He thought, oh my God, you look so cool. Oh God, I wanna like have that kind of thing as well. And his uncle said, "Yep, well, what we're doing, I'm enrolling in Humpspescher's Hussars, and we're going to defend against the French invaders." And he said, "Yep, I want to defend my country against French invaders." His mum would be, she would be really angry about this, but because she sent him to be with his uncle to be safe, and his uncle's put him right in firing line. But so he joins Humpspescher's Hussars to fight against the French invaders, and they do. They fight against the French invaders fairly successfully, but they really can't, stop them. And the French continue, and they bulldoze across, and they invade their region. But they keep on fighting, and one day, they keep on fighting for their freedom. But one day, there's a big meeting, and the Mr. Honsbash, this count or whatever he is, comes and tells them, "Okay, sorry guys, I've actually sold my my little fighting force to the British." So he basically sold all these men as fighting slaves to the British, and there was a few people that tried to revolt against this, and they ran off, desert, and they were shot as deserters. So they had no choice but to be shipped off across to Britain and to become members of the KGL, which is the King's Foreign Legion. So they became British soldiers, and this was happened throughout Germany. So yeah. So this group who was fighting for their freedom were now fighting for the British freedom, and they had no choice in the matter. And this Norbert Lansneck just became a career soldier, and he was fighting for freedom over in Jamaica against the slaves who were revolting.
For colonialism.
Yeah, against the slaves who were revolting against the British plantation
No
owners
freedom
there.
for you, slaves.
He was fighting for freedom against the Argentinians and Uruguayans, I think it was, over in South America. So yeah, this is the true story of people who fight for freedom and what happens to them, which is quite interesting.
And that is it. That if they were to make a movie about hussars, they are not going to show that. They're going to show them being defenders of their country, basically.
Yes.
And that is a big issue and a big problem because it distorts not only history, which is my pet peeve. Like, you don't need to distort or destroy history to find your cool stuff. History is full of the cool stuff that you are specifically looking for. You just have to put in the work to find it. That's one thing. But the other thing is that what we have today, the concepts that we have today, have to be appreciated as conquests, cultural conquests that we have today. They were not a thing 200, 300 years ago, 400 years ago. Or when they were in very specific situations. Like, for example, let me give you an example from Greece that is like all about freedom. We have been about freedom since forever. However, let's go to a very dark part of Greek history, which is like the 1200s, 1300s, where we had the first fall of Constantinople, the first fall of Byzantium, not to the Ottomans, not to any kind of Muslim or Turk, but to the Venetians and to the Franks, as we call them over here. So what we had was people on their way to to the Crusades or whatever, making a pit stop to Greece and Byzantium, and pretty much bleeping the place. They completely they to give you an idea. We have this saying in Greece that goes, "We prefer a Turkish turban to a Pope's tiara." So what this, of course, doesn't we don't use it anymore. But why did that proverb happen? Because the Westerners were so terrible that when the Turks came over and like occupied Greece, they were seen as liberators. That's how terrible the Catholics were. So, and I'm saying the Catholics because that's the main separator that they had against the Greeks, beside the Greek ethnicity. So, did we fight for our freedom from the Westerners? Yes. How? By helping the Turks take us over. And then, we had like a honeymoon period of having the Turks being pretty liberal with freedoms in Greece, religious freedoms and a lot of commercial freedoms, blah, 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 the whole thing. And then they stopped being so liberal. They said, okay, now honeymoon is over and we need to have our return on investment. So all of that stopped and we had your average classic stereotype oppression. And then we had the struggle for freedom again, this time from the Turks, without wanting the Westerners yet. That's how bad it still was. So the idea, what I'm saying is that the idea of fighting for our freedom and becoming completely independent came from the fact that we had such traumatic experiences from all the great powers around that we needed independence to have freedom. And that's how the modern concept of freedom in Greece was born. Before that, we didn't
Oh.
have that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, because like you said, it's like serfs,
Yeah,
with the rulers, and the rulers are the ones who determine it anyway, and you're never really free, no matter who is in charge.
exactly.
Which
Exactly.
was pretty much what life was like in the past, the distant past. Like if we're talking about like a lot of these historical things that we were, like movies we were going to talk about.
Hmm.
Okay, so Braveheart again. So they weren't fighting for the nation of Scotland or anything like that.
Hmm.
They were fighting for his right to be in charge
Very clear.
instead of Edward. But then we've got things like Gladiator, which,
Oh
oh
my
my
God,
god,
life.
this is so silly. Like the idea is, oh yeah, King Emperor Commodius or whatever, he's gonna be the emperor, and the old king, the old emperor, actually wanted things to be a democracy, and yeah, that's what this Maximus really wants. He wants democracy.
Yeah, he
No,
wants. No, he doesn't.
and it's not like the democracy then is not like what we think of democracy now. This is bunch of like royalty in a conclave deciding what's right. These are
It was a kind of oligarchy, but the difference was, and that's also the case in the direct democracy in Athens,
hmm,
ancient Athens, I mean, you didn't have freedom. It was not about freedom. It was about finding the system of governance that best worked
yeah,
for the city state. And the difference in quality was that the logic was okay, more heads are better than one in deciding certain things so that we don't make as many mistakes. That was the whole logic of direct democracy then. And that's why only full citizens, which is like male citizens of a
hmm,
certain class and upwards, were included. And then because we had the usual oligarchic idiots, it was expanded to all the male citizens because women were not citizens. They were glorified livestock, basically, in ancient Athens. So uh, that was not our democracy, or at
yeah,
least
and
the democracy as we have it in our heads, because what is applied is a completely different story.
mhm.
Um, yeah,
So the Roman democracy was even more, or even less, like representative, like because that's just in the Senate, and particular senators. It's very political, obviously, about who could get into there, but you'd have to have money and power in order to get into that role.
and
It
just
couldn't just be any
mhm.
person.
And just consider that the tyrant at the time had a very positive connotation. A guy with super authority, overriding everything else, was considered the best thing for crisis situations during during the Roman Republic, which was not like a republic is not a democracy. That's another problem we have with terms nowadays. But yeah, um, so when you have Hollywood presenting Maximus as being the super uber democratic guy that is also super liberal, and he doesn't look upon non-Romans as inferior, which he would have, by the
Mm.
way. um, that was the main appeal of becoming a Roman, so that you wouldn't be a second-class citizen at the time. Okay, um, it distorts. why this guy would have fought in the first place. And yeah, it
Yeah.
makes, in my opinion, for a cheaper narrative, and it takes away from the actual freedom tales that
He
we
would have
can.
fought for himself, really, and self determination. But I think they're like confusing his story a bit with Spartacus and the idea of slavery as a revolution, which is
Spartacus
quite
fought for
different.
freedom, literally, because he wanted to be freed, because he was a slave. So that's a freedom story, an actual freedom story.
Yeah, yeah. So bloody Ridley Scott and his weird takes, but everyone, because that's set in the past, people think of that as being an accurate depiction of Rome, whereas not really. So let's see. What are some others? The King Arthur film,
Ah,
or King Arthur's in. Well, not all King Arthur films talk about freedom, but
no.
some of them are used to do that. So one of the ideas is freedom against the Saxon invaders, and that's quite popular.
Or like I don't remember the last one with sorry, with Guy Ritchie very well. I just remember that I had all the fun, and it was a terrible movie, but I loved it. Uh, I think it presents King John as this oppressor Sauron style guy.
King John, you're talking
He,
about Robin Hood now, are you?
oh
Not
yeah.
King Arthur.
So who was that guy in King Arthur? It was like a mashup. See, because they basically combined the characters of Robin Hood and King Arthur, and yeah, you had this very oppressive king with magic, and he was oppressing everybody, and he was spreading black magic and stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, it was awesome. um, so there's that, and he invests in a Herod style massacre of youth trying to kill off Arthur before he becomes like he comes of age and stuff like that. I mean,
God,
it is such a mashup of all the tropes that you can think of. It's amazing. Like get a bunch
insane.
of friends and a lot of beer, and it will be the best movie ever. Um,
So who was oppressing Arthur from growing up? I mean, I know there's a lot of different versions and different takes. And in one of them, we have like his older brother, his adoptive brother or whatever, was the one who was slightly
the
against.
original, and when we say original, that's another thing. In that, who is the original Arthur? That's going to be a debate. But let's say from like some of the oldest versions hasn't got anything to do with oppression. It has to do with warring warrior kings that vie for the high king throne. Basically,
Mm.
that's all there is to it, really. And he Arthur's dad was the last guy. He got scragged, and then the sword was wedged in the stone. And since then, everyone was fighting and then trying to get the sword out of the stone so that they could be the High King. And until Arthur comes and becomes the High King, unites everyone with the Knights of the Round Table, blah blah blah. So
Yeah,
it
I mean,
was nothing to do with freedom, nothing.
no, at its root, um, it's a very universal sort of story. I'm sure there's like similar stories, like with the like Genghis Khan, the way he kind of like united the Mongol tribes and became
Mhm.
like the Khan,
Yeah.
and not
Well,
just Temujin or whatever it used to be called. You know.
it's basically the forming of a
Yeah.
nation trope, it's not about freedom necessarily. It's about gathering everyone and creating X nation, Britain, uh, Mongolia, or what have you, China. There are a lot of um, legends of old Chinese emperors that did that, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. But has been turned to that in some modern iterations. I mean, there are even some past iterations that sort of played on that big as well. The idea of like the Saxon invaders and stopping them and retaining Celtic identity and then again like repurposed because it was pretty much an ingrained story for a long time in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think they were like it had sort of popularity because of the Norman invaders. So that was another big invading group that changed the culture. And I believe like it was quite popular in Victorian times because they sort of brought that up as an idea of, oh yeah, this is our original Britishness, and we have
Mm-hmm.
our Saxon heritage, because say the Victorians were very much, they had a very strong German heritage, but they related quite strongly to the fact that actually England itself was formed by the Angles and the Saxons invading way back in 500 AD or and all that kind of the migration period. So we are, even though we have quite recent ties to Germany, we also have quite strong ties to the origins of the country. So they were sort of thinking about that in a way to minimize this Norman aspect of Britain that they were supplanting.
I think a stronger work of fiction that did that was Ivanhoe, more than because Ivanhoe is completely us versus them. So the British versus the Normans in super proud knight, fair lady, plus a bit of anti-Semitism thrown in. Um,
Yeah, they even had that in the movie with Tony Curtis.
I don't remember. I have only read the book.
Ah.
And the book it reads pretty, like it's pretty interesting in general, and very cringy when it comes to the portrayal of the Jews in the story. Although it is pro-Jewish, but it is also manages to be racist and pro-Jewish as well. It's amazing. Um, or rather, it's like a good Jews versus bad Jews, I guess. Anyway. So yeah, I think Ivanhoe was more about our freedom from the Normans than anything else.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I can't really remember. I haven't read the book, and it's a long time since I saw the film. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right, let's bring up another one. 300,
My
the
favorite.
famous
Yeah.
comic by whoever it was, and then the famous movie.
The guy who did the Sin City.
Yeah, can't remember his name.
Oh my God. Google. Help. I swear sometimes I feel I'm getting Alzheimer's or something. 300.
Frank Miller.
Frank Miller, yeah. So, okay. 300 is decent in that it is a historical fantasy. So they totally go for broke with the freedom trope in ways that wouldn't be historically accurate because they portray the Spartans as highly militaristic but also highly pro freedom, which is definitely not. Spartans were the OG fascists, and they did it really well. Um, and they were the prime oppressors of the whole of the Peloponnese, basically. So, and they were proud of it. That was their thing. We are awesome in oppressing everybody else but us. They were not hiding it. That was part of who they were. So,
Yeah.
in the sense that they didn't fight for freedom. They fought for the right, quote unquote, I guess, to remain as they were, oppressors in their land. So the idea of freedom wasn't as strong in the sense that it's not freedom, it's territory. This is my territory and you get to stay out of it. And that's all there is to it. It's territorial struggles back then.
Mm.
The first idea of self-determination and freedom actually was in the Peloponnesian War, where Athens fought Sparta, and they had opposing regimes and completely, well, they were both oppressors, by the way. I mean, both were super imperialistic. They had colonized everybody else in Greece. But the idea was that Athens fought for her freedom from Sparta because they forced them to have a king. And that's when the pattern of we hate kings was born in Greece. So, yeah, you have the Peloponnesian War to blame or thank, depending on your stance, for the perpetual never to die anti-royalist feeling in Greece. Because the Spartans became the supreme oppressors of all of Greece for a tiny bit, but they were so oppressively oppressive that everyone thought that Athens, that was also oppressive, was super liberal. So to give you an idea. So that was the first time where we have the idea that we fight for our freedom in the sense that we also want to throw the regime and we want to have the self-determination that we had before.
Mm.
And that's when it was born, more than anywhere else.
So it's the realistic version, unlike the Spartans calling for freedom.
Yeah, no.
They never did.
And also the Athenians wouldn't have called for freedom during the Battle of Marathon. They would have called for let's kick them back into Persia. But yeah, that's it.
Say, let's think. What other ones? Yeah, we talked about the Patriots.
Yeah.
Which is just
The
solidly
more we
based
reach
on
modernity in history, the closer we
mythology.
come to freedom,
Yes.
as we expected.
But then we've got sci-fi, so we've got Avatar.
Avatar is freedom from colonialism. But the colonialist guy is going to free you from colonialism.
Yes, we've got White Savior there.
Yeah, that's
Which is
another trope.
an old trope.
Yeah.
So Dances with Wolves, there's a lot of stuff like that.
Well, at least
Samurai,
Dances with
Lost
Wolves, though.
Mohicans.
Dances with Wolves, is he really the white liberator? He's not. He's a white guy that gets absorbed into the Indian culture, at least as far as I remember, and he loses together with them. So I don't know if that qualifies.
Yeah, well, in Avatar, the guy actually helps win the day against the.
Yeah. Oh, not only that, he becomes the local hero that also is the prophecy, and it's like I don't know. He becomes
He's Jesus.
Yeah, basically
Well,
super Jesus.
then there's a cleverer film that's not always seen as clever as it is, that does the opposite. It's Starship Troopers. Now,
Oh,
from one perspective, like from a simplistic perspective, this is space battles against giant bugs. And it's not that clever a film, but it is more clever than that. So what Verhoeven really did there was actually have humans as being space Nazis against these bugs, and the truth is revealed in the end that those bugs didn't actually attack humans out of nowhere, that the humans are actually attacking bug worlds in order to invade them and destroy them and commit genocide and steal their resources, with the lie of, you know, freedom being, you know, the catch cry, and freedom through the ability to serve as a soldier, which makes you a full citizen of the country. So it was the idea of showing, yeah, actually this is what Nazism is like, and this is what being caught up in a Nazi regime is all about. And this is a great portrayal of that. So that is an undermining of the idea of freedom, which is very, very
that
clever.
is an interesting film in so many ways. But it is a nice, let's say, stepping stone to talking about freedom itself and how it is used as a trope. In that, what is freedom and how do people gain it? And there is a lot of lack of proper terminology, I would say, in that. Are you free just because you are not occupied? Or can you be free when you are occupied? What is all of that? And what do I mean by this? The right to self determination is, as we talked about, something that wasn't a thing for most of humanity,
In
humanity
history.
history. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's not even a thing right now, but we are tricked into feeling or thinking that we are free when we, like, do we actually have freedom? How much freedom do we have? Because being free to walk out and go shopping, for example, or, you know, talk shit about XY politician, is that what freedom is? Because that's not something that is new. People had it before and they were not
Yeah.
free. So, what am I saying here is that pop culture is trivializing a concept that is still very new for humanity, and you are playing with something that you don't really understand. At least that's how
It's
I feel about it.
Well, that's why I say it's a myth, because
Mm,
even though it like has a very real grain of truth in a lot of ways, the version we have now is so artificial and simplified that it doesn't like bear any real resemblance to the actual thing, and it's dangerous because it's used to support ideas of like the invasion of Afghanistan and the invasion
mhm,
of Iraq, and the idea that you're bringing freedom. Iraqi freedom was one of the names of the invasion, which is like Orwellian insane.
mhm.
Yeah, sure, Saddam Hussein's not a great, guy, but invading our country should never be called freedom. That's
Yeah,
just crazy, and that's not what happens to the populace. They don't become free.
exactly. And consider, like, what war is fought because people want it.
Well, what invasion? Yeah, invasions are dodgy. I mean, that's one of the things. That's what see. Everybody in the West hates the Russians for invading Ukraine, but one of the ways the Russians are supporting that is they're saying we're freeing the
Mhm.
Russian-speaking regions of Ukraine, and these people are being oppressed and
Mhm.
tortured and all this, and we're freeing them. So it cuts both ways, because once the good guys do it, everybody can do it, and we can all call for fake freedom. So I don't think it should be used. I think it should be banned.
Yeah,
Stop it.
honestly. And now we're moving away from talking about pop culture, but I think it is salient. And if you have listened all the way to here, you get to hear a bit of politics and philosophy, I guess. But I do think that you cannot have freedom unless everybody is free. If someone isn't free, then you have a domino effect that is going to reach you, even if we assume that, okay, you have managed to be free, however we define that. You have full self-determination, you are not oppressed in a classist or caste way or financial way or by arms or what have you. You are not, you have self-determination. But the guys 5 countries to the left are not. Then it is mathematically certain that their problem is going to reach you at some point. Why? Because you have people that are practicing oppression, and this is a barrel without a bottom. It's a bottomless barrel, and they will never stop. Which is something that history has proven over and over again.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah, this is true. When you're free, often you're just doing it because you're living off the back of someone else. You know, like the royals were always free in all these countries because the serfs weren't. That's how the calculation goes. Yeah. William Wallace was free because the little serfs who supported his little war effort weren't, and he didn't care about their freedom.
Exactly.
The Spartans were free, but the Helots weren't.
No.
They stayed as slaves. You could kill as many of
And
those
then
as
you can also argue whether the actual Spartans were also free because they had to conform to a specific, very rigid social organization. But yeah, at least they were freer, let's say, than the Helots.
Freer than the Helots, anyway.
Yeah, and again, take the Nazis. I mean, that's an excellent example, not because we have turned them into this cartoony antagonist that twirls mustaches. It's that they wanted to break away from the oppression that they were suffering, among other things. Okay, I'm oversimplifying here. That they were suffering in the interim between the two wars. But then, if they didn't stop there, they wanted more and more and more because you need resources to support certain things. And if you are not willing or you do not have the capacity to negotiate for these resources, or you generally feel that it will be more lucrative for you if you just take it. And trust me, most people say, why should I pay for something I can just take? Okay. Then you get imperialism. And that's how it happened, because the problem is not that you don't like oppression, usually. It's that you don't like being in the position of the oppressed. You are just fine when you are in the position of the oppressor.
Because you're free.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if everyone else isn't.
So the system, and that's the biggest issue with all these freedom things, is that not people, but the pattern, the trope, if you like, is not let's destroy the system of oppression. It's that let's move up in the pyramid and not be the oppressed anymore.
Well, it's like our other
that's the
podcast.
difference.
It's my turn now, bitches.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem. The problem is that people don't realize that freedom is hard and it requires everyone to be free. It's like ones and zeros. If one is not free, nobody is free. It's just that you have the system tilted in your
You
favor.
just change the balance,
Yeah,
really. You don't
yeah,
really free. Well, I
and
mean,
yeah,
there are a lot of real world examples where, people fight for freedom and don't manage to get the freedom they fought for because the world, as you say, really can't work that way. Like a good example is East Timor. So this is a region of it was like, okay, so it was originally held by the Portuguese, I think, colonized by them, and then when Indonesia sort of gained independence for the whole area, they sort of gradually took over and basically imperially colonized all the islands around the place. They created their own little democratic empire, as countries do, and became the most strongest power in that region, and they conquered East Timor. And then in the 1990s, the East Timorese fought for their independence. Now, how did they do that? They had Australia helping them.
mm-hmm.
So Australia helped them, and they thought, well, finally we're going to be free of the East Timorese, the Indonesians. We can have our own country and our own right to self-determination. But they didn't realize that you can't actually get total freedom unless you do it like you were saying, like the Greeks kind of learned that you had to do it for yourselves, because what having Australia helping them meant that now Australia, the real reason they helped them have that freedom was so they could have rights to the lucrative gas resources in the East Timor Sea, all around the islands. And what can East Timor do about it? Crap all, because they've got no army or no real stake, and they owe Australia everything for their freedom. So, sorry, you have to
exactly.
you have to give us all those resources, fishing resources, gas resources,
exactly,
because you owe us
and
for your freedom.
You know what? The same happened in Greece. We realized that we had to do it on our own. We started it on our own, and initially everyone was against us. But when we were successful, what happened? We were given loans. So that why though? Because we needed ammo, we needed arms, we needed, San Familiar, who needs all the weapons right now. And those debts were not paid off until 1980.
Wow. Yeah, and that's what Ukraine's going to have big bills coming in.
Yeah. Because
no matter what happens.
Because you know what? Since they couldn't catch us because the independence had already been we had the foot in the door, let's say, okay, and it would be hard for PR, especially with the Philhellenic wave that was happening at the time, Delacroix and everybody else, Lord Byron, blah blah blah. It would be hard to have everyone crack down on the underdog that was doing so well in the first couple of years. So how do you rein back in those people that tried to, poke their head over the surface? You get them into debt, and then you do pretty much the same thing as Australia did with East Timor. So, yeah, that's why we had the king after this.
It was, yes. So the catch cry of freedom is, in the modern world, evened out. We're closer to actually having that. It still proves to be false quite often, because we simplify it too much, and we think that this kind of thing is easy to attain, and it's just not.
It's not.
So I always think of it when I see it like in Star Trek and like the 90s Star Trek. Oh, 60s Star Trek.
Hmm.
You know, when I see it in these kind of films, this concept, I think of like a fantastical magical object, you know, like the ring from the Lord of the Rings or
Yeah,
something, rather than being a
MacGuffin.
concept. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's this mythical item, because the way people talk about it is just, what do you mean freedom? What is this freedom? What is this thing? You know, it's like when they talk about love. Love is the greatest parent. What
Yeah.
the drive to breed? What is that? The most powerful
Well, that is quite
thing
powerful.
in the universe?
But yeah, that's the point. And the problem is that we have a lot of people correctly wanting freedom, but not knowing how to get it, first of all. And even worse, not knowing how to keep it. And that's the biggest issue. Or not realizing,
Not knowing what it is.
yeah, not realizing that they don't have it. So, we are part of the free world, are we? Like, do you
The
feel
free
free?
world.
The free world. Whenever I hear that, I cringe, honestly. Like, oh, we are part of the free world, the West. Dude, I mean, what freedom can you have when you have to decide whether to buy your medicine or your food? Where is the freedom in that? So on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that idea was, it's against the idea of the Soviet bloc and, you know, the communist world, and
Yeah,
they're not free. So
they were
I
not
thought,
free.
were they? Are they not? I don't
They
know.
were, you know what? The problem in general is that we still tend to think in teams. My team, everything perfect. Their team, everything bad. And that's
Mm.
why humanity is stagnant, because we don't understand that there were good things and bad things in the opposing team, and there are good things and bad things in our team as well. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
it's very
where
varied and different.
they were as free as you. They just went about it a little differently, and that was it.
Yeah, well, pretty much. And like communism in like Yugoslavia was very different from communism in Hungary, from Poland, from Russia, from
China.
sorry, USSR. Yeah, China, from North Korea,
Hmm.
from Belarus to
Yeah,
Estonia to whoever
exactly,
else
exactly.
had it.
So
So yeah, free world was a bit of
the free world,
a PR exercise.
yeah, and it was for internal consumption in the sense that it was for the free world to consume. Just like on the other side, it was like we are again the free world. They
Yeah,
also
pretty
were free.
much. Because we have workers having power where
Hmm.
they don't over here, and blah blah blah. And
Yeah.
I'm not gonna parrot. I'm not
No,
gonna
no.
advocate for the.
We're not going into that. It doesn't. The regime doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The rhetoric is the same in modernity, and in the past, when we had different cliches, all sides had the same cliche. Everyone. It's a common trope for humanity, unfortunately. But I really wish, if you have reached all the way to here, I'm amazed. You are a champ. Um, like, consider how much work has to go into freedom, how much work has to go into democracy, how active you need to be in order to maintain something like that. And just have this as a question. And that would be awesome if you did.
How would you really write a comic or a book or a movie about freedom and people attaining freedom? I think if I did it, I would do it like nuanced and say, hang on, this isn't the freedom I fought for, you know, that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
and actually have it beginning as a very simplistic kind of tale, freedom against oppression, and then actually having, you know, what freedom actually means.
Yeah. This
You
is
just have to.
surprisingly, this is exactly what I do in Art of Veiling. Like in the third book, it's we start with, oh, we're being invaded. Let's all band up for freedom to keep our freedom. Second book is we fight for our freedom and being free from the bad guys that are coming to get us. And book three is okay. Now it's not a spoiler because it is not resolved in the normal quote unquote way that you would expect. So now we have our freedom. Do we? And that's how what we explore in book three, which I hopefully will have finished this year. um, because I
Well, yeah.
writing a little bit. But what is freedom is something that we don't spend nearly enough time looking into. We all think we know what it is, and we really don't. It has to sink in that in order to have good things, you have to work for these good things and not expect someone to hand them over to you on a platter or a status quo to exist just because you kicked out one bee hole and now everything is peachy. So yeah. My soapbox, guys. Thank you for listening and coming to my TED talk about.
TED Talk. Oh, fuck. All right. Well, yeah, sorry we sort of meandered. We're going to make this Quackcast in a slightly different way in the future.
We are. We
Depending
are
on
going to
feedback.
get your feedback and apply it. That's why we are asking for it. But for now, we are still doing the meandering thing.
Taking advantage of our freedom.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for listening to
Thank
Quackcast number
you.
605, the Freedom Cast. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.